See, the real science begins when you are really interested in something and you want to find out.
And he was actually cremated over there. And then the question arose, should there be a monument? People decided, no, this must not happen to Raman. And a fitting tribute to him should be a tree.
To understand C.V. Raman, we have to understand his love for nature and the human spirit. He believed that the human spirit never ceases from questing. Why was the sea blue? Why do flowers have colors? How does the tabla make its sound? Why did crystals refract so much? Raman, a man of many contradictions. A great teacher, but an intolerant perfectionist. A simple man at heart, but a supreme egotist. A recluse, yet he loved children and teaching. But without doubt, a genius. Chandrasekhar Venkat Raman was born in November 1888 into a conservative Tamil family. He was surrounded by learning and tradition as his father was a lecturer at Presidency College, Madras. He became the youngest student at Presidency College and completed his MA at 18. As a young man, he was influenced by Edwin Arnold's classic book, The Light of Asia, as it explored the life of the Buddha, who overcame the problems of his age through intellect and willpower. 1907 was a turning point in Raman's life. He received his MA that year. He was married to his wife and lifelong partner Lokasundari and had 2 sons with her.
And then he sat for the Indian Financial Service exam. There he stood first and he got a job as Assistant Auditor General, Government of India. And this, since Calcutta was the capital, the head office of this Auditor General was in Calcutta. So that is how he came.
One day, while taking a tram to work, he noticed a sign outside the Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science.
And he entered and he found an excellent, outstanding library, very good equipments, and he said, I can start working here immediately.
He loved spending his mornings and evenings at the association. And by 1909, he had published his first paper in Nature magazine on the effects of vibrating strings. When Mukherjee asked him to become the first Palit Professor of Physics, Raman jumped at it. His experiments and publications at IACS and Calcutta University made him world famous. On a trip to Europe in 1924, he was amazed by the rich blue color of the Mediterranean Sea. This resulted in a paper he wrote on board the ship entitled On the Molecular Scattering of Light in Water and the Color of the Sea. This was the beginning of his love affair with light scattering that would eventually lead to his Nobel-winning discovery.
When light falls on any matter, piece of matter, material, my forehead, for example, is also material. When light is scattered, the color of light changes actually. This change in the color, it's what we call the Raman effect.
Raman and his student Ramanathan and his another student K.S. Krishnan, they separately reported same phenomena. If you pass green light through a liquid, and you will get a very weak yellow light, a very small fraction.
What's happening is the light which is coming in probably has just one wavelength, one component, very pure. But when it's scattered, it generates many different light beams or different wavelengths. A light, of course, carries energy. When it falls on matter, it makes those atoms and all vibrate. So part of the energy of the light is given to these vibrations. And remaining part is what gets scattered out. This scattered light is a fingerprint of the material. This fingerprint is sort of so unique that you do all material science these days using Raman effect.
You have to measure the wavelength correctly. So he has no money to buy a spectrograph. He wrote to G.D. Birla, give me money to buy a spectrograph, and if you give me the money, I promise I will bring a Nobel Prize in 1 year. So G.D. Birla actually gave him money. Then he became very nervous. Somebody else can also publish. So the first paper he sent to Nature in telegram, And he wrote everything in a nice form of a full paper with spectra, with equations, everything, and he published from Indian Journal of Physics, and he sent the papers by post to several Nobel laureates, Rutherford, Niels Bohr and others, that I believe this is a Nobel Prize winning discovery, you must nominate me for the Nobel Prize. He called a press conference 28th February 1928. It came on the next day that C.V. Raman claimed that he has made a very important discovery and this might get Nobel Prize. And this is why 28th February is called National Science Day.
Now, why did this discovery attract the attention of people like Niels Bohr and Einstein in Europe and the great Sommerfeld, whose students were creating this new revolution? Does matter also behave as a quantum object, or can we continue to describe matter as we had described it from Newton's time? And that is where the importance of Raman's discovery came in. In 1928, Sommerfeld was visiting Japan when he heard about Raman's discovery in February 1928. Let me go to Calcutta and see for myself whether this. So he came to Calcutta. He was convinced that this was a real discovery. And sure enough, as soon as he went back to Europe, all these great guys joined together and proposed Raman for the Nobel Prize.
The Nobel Prize winning telegram came to him on 15th of November 1930. And he went there, received the Nobel Prize, but after receiving the Nobel Prize, he cried on the stage. He said that all other Nobel laureates have their national flag on their chair, but on my chair there is a British Union Jack. And therefore I realized my poor country does not have a flag of our own. So I cannot claim that I have come here as an Indian. And in his official speech, he dedicated his Nobel Prize to the freedom fighters of India who are spending their golden time of their life in a British jail. This is the spectrograph which Raman used to record the first Raman spectrum, and you can see the photograph of young Raman at the age of 40. And this is the replica of Raman's Nobel Prize. You can see C.V. Raman, 1930, written in the Roman letters.
In a speech to the Royal Society, Lord Rutherford said, "The Raman effect must rank among the best 3 or 4 discoveries in experimental physics." In 1929, he became known as Sir C.V. Raman after being bestowed with a knighthood. Then, in 1934, he was offered directorship of the prestigious Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore. Raman immediately went about revolutionizing the sleepy old establishment. He built new labs, purchased equipment, and tried to bring European scientists who had been persecuted by Hitler to India.
Hitler was becoming more and more popular, and his anti-Semitic views were very clear. All the Jewish physicists left Germany as fast as they could. Many of them were looking for jobs. So what Raman realized, look, if some of them could be persuaded to come to Bangalore, it'll make a huge impact on physics in India. Now the Council of the Indian Institute of Science, which consisted of British industrialists, took a very grim view of this. The council members took the point of view, Schrödinger and Max Born, they actually used the word, these are second-rate physicists because you are appointing people who have no jobs in Europe, you are giving them a professorship. And so this went all the way up to the Privy Council in London, and then Raman was forced to resign.
He was contractually obliged to teach there and spent the next 12 years teaching, researching, and nurturing young minds. When he had first arrived in Bangalore, the government of Mysore granted him a large piece of land next to the IISc in recognition of his Nobel Prize. In 1934, he established the now famous Indian Academy of Science there, with the vision of making it a world-class body in the mold of the Royal Society. Raman's real dream was to set up his own research institute, and when he retired in 1948, he established the Raman Research Institute at the same place.
He couldn't keep Raman away from students. So even in this institute, in his retirement, You had a bunch of brilliant students for about 10 years.
He designed and built all the buildings and labs himself, planted the trees and gardens, conducted research into crystals, musical acoustics and optics. The institute was also home for Raman and his wife Lokasundari until the end of their lives. It was his very own haven of knowledge and beauty. This was a wonderful time in his life. In 1960, after 10 years of great work, the institute took a turn away from teaching, and Raman became a hermit-like recluse.
Around 1960, Raman decided not to have any more students because he had disagreement with the government, and he was made a national professor. Nehru was willing to give funds, and Dr. K.S. Krishnan was very influential with Nehru. But Raman rejected all that because they said, look, all you have to do is once a year you have to send some annual report. Raman, in his characteristic fashion, he said, I don't have to send any such thing to you. If you don't want to give me the money, if you want to put fine prints condition, I don't want your money. A fallout of that was that he could no longer support students.
He built high walls around the grounds, put a large lock on the gate, and had a sign warning people to keep out. But he always had room for children.
There was a guy called Abdul. Abdul will come to Raman and say, some children have come to the gate, sir. So Raman will personally go to the gate, open the gate, bring them in, lock the gate, and spend the day with them, wandering around in the gardens, telling them about the trees and the flowers and the butterflies and so on. I have met some of these people, how that 1 or 2 hours they spent with him, how that passion has rubbed off on them. There are 2 components to Raman's legacy. The Raman effect itself, which was discovered in 1928, continues to be at the forefront of science and technology today in a manner that one never anticipated. That is why chemists, biologists are very interested in Raman effect as a tool. That is one aspect of it. Intercontinental communication is essentially taking place not through satellite, but through optical fibers. Light is carrying the signals. Raman effect is being used to transmit signals which are into light. This is something that if Raman had been alive today, he would have been absolutely thrilled.
Raman once said, "A purposeful life needs an axis or hinge to which it is firmly fixed and yet around which it can freely revolve." As I see it, this axis or hinge has been, in my own case, strongly enough, not the love of science, not even the love of nature, but a certain abstract idealism or belief in the value of the human spirit and the virtue of human endeavor and achievement. On the 21st of November 1970, Sir C.V. Raman passed away and was cremated in his favorite place in the world, the grounds of the Raman Research Institute. Fittingly, Raman's memorial at his favorite institute was a tree.